Thank you very much, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Could I just begin by remarking that your president, Maryam Rafshavi, is a very, very difficult act to follow. After such a moving and very human rights speech, I must say. I'm very pleased to have been invited to speak on the subject of fundamentalism and equality for women, because I believe, as you've already heard, that it is one of the key human rights challenges of the world today. Sadly, fundamentalism is not confined to any one geographical area or religion. I'm aware that this conference wants to shine a particular light on the situation of women and human rights in Iran, and indeed the struggle of women and men in Camp Ashraf in Iraq. And I share these concerns and the need to support and protect some 1,000 women dissidents from Iran who are in Camp Ashraf, a large number of whom, as we've heard, have already suffered severe torture in Iranian jails. They are the women activists who stood out against oppression and claimed their rights, as so many of their sisters are doing today in demonstrations in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Libya, in Palestine, and in Iran itself. Looking at television images of young women and men asserting their basic dignity and seeking human rights and freedom to participate in the political and economic life of their countries is incredibly moving. They've stood up to tanks, to rubber and even live bullets, and to tear gas. They draw inspiration from each other, and they inspire us as we watch in awe. The Elders, a group of world leaders brought together by Nelson Mandela, to which I belong, issued an early statement of strong support in which we said, "As elders, we stand with all those crying out for freedom and basic rights. The universal yearning of people to be free, to have their voices heard, and to participate in the decisions that affect their lives and communities cannot be extinguished. We are therefore extremely dismayed by the tragic loss of life that has occurred in recent days and the repressive tactics to which some authorities have resorted in suppressing the protests. We call upon all those concerned, governments, security services, political parties, and concerned citizens, to avoid the use of violence and to show the utmost respect for the sanctity of human life and for the right of people to campaign for change and reform in their own societies." And we would, of course, extend that also to the people, and in particular those who want to assert their rights and freedom in Iran. Given what has been happening in recent days in Libya, with foreign mercenaries and even fighter planes being used against peaceful demonstrators, I would urge us all at this conference to use whatever influence we have to stop this violence. The Elders decided very early on that a core aim of our work would be to promote equality for girls and women. In particular, we decided that we should try to address the misuse of religion and tradition to justify practices that discriminate against girls and women. We don't do this as critics of religion and tradition. It's important indeed to point out that our chair, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, is a great man of faith. We represent indeed a variety of views, from secular but also Christian, Muslim and Hindu. We see religion and tradition as largely positive forces for social cohesion and justice. What we want to address is the misuse of our great faiths to perpetrate inequality and harm to girls and women. To focus my remarks on the role of women in the Muslim world and attitudes in Europe and elsewhere towards Islam. In that way, I'd like to build on what you have heard about the violations of human rights and maybe probe a little bit deeper. I speak as a European who has tried to listen and tried to understand what we really have to be addressing. We need to stand in greater solidarity and sisterhood here in France, in European countries generally, in the United States and in the Muslim world. There are so many misunderstandings, and I think that this forum focusing on fundamentalism with a particular attention to Iran can help us to open up more of an alliance of understanding and solidarity and sisterhood. It's that solidarity and sisterhood which also identifies and highlights the plight of those courageous Iranian women in Camp Ashraf and struggling in Iran itself today. They need our solidarity. They need the collective voice from this conference to bring greater strength and support for their cause. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing literally a tidal wave of freedom's promise unraveling before our very eyes. It's an exciting time, it's a dangerous time, and it's a time that I don't think that any of us here can predict exactly how it's going to turn out, but the potential of it is astounding. The promises that are before us in the North African littoral could expand to other countries and could expand in many different ways. And we hope it would also expand to the people of Iran in their quest for justice and freedom and a better life for themselves and their children. I was particularly taken by many of the comments that were made before me. I was particularly taken personally in my capacity as National Security Advisor watching the demonstrations in Iran in 2009 following a very fraudulent election. I was very taken by the passion for human rights that people in Iran and outside of Iran have exhibited. And I'm very proud to be here today to say a few words about the days ahead and the potential that faces us now, and that only a few weeks ago we could have only guessed at. It's my opinion that there's a lot of things that could be done to help things along. I was recently in Israel at a conference, and I posited the idea that now is not the time for leaders to be passive, but to be active and to be bold. And the Middle East peace process is certainly part of this whole denouement that we hope we will see unravel in the Middle East, a denouement that will result in freedom for many people, including the better security for the State of Israel, but also the freedom and opportunity for the Palestinian people that have struggled so long to have a state. So it is a time for statesmanship from our elected leaders. It is not a time for politicians. It is a time for courage. It is a time for determination. And with that, anything is possible. I'd like to say a few words about U.S. policy towards Iran, not to be defensive, but to say simply that it has been the President's intention since the day of the inauguration to develop a level of dialogue with the Iranian government that would determine once and for all whether there is any possibility of reason and compromise on the big issues of our time. And certainly the fate of the people in Iran and their conditions along the human rights vein is part and parcel of that dialogue. But in other areas of concern, obviously, includes the nuclear program that much of the world is concerned about, certainly the Middle East is concerned about. And I've said before that there are three main reasons why this is a concern for not just the people in the region, but a global concern, that a nuclear weapons-capable Iran has already declared, under the leadership of Mr. Ahmadinejad, what they would plan to do with those nuclear weapons, and that is not encouraging for the future. Secondly, a nuclear-capable Iran would for sure trigger a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, also not a good development. And thirdly, and perhaps most dangerously, is an Iran that has that technology to produce weapons of mass destruction would be probably tempted to use them through non-state actors. And that would be a development that would be catastrophic, not just for the people of Iran and the people of the Middle East, but for the entire globe. So we have had 2 years now to overtly and covertly assess the true intentions of this regime. 2 years is long enough. It is clear that the Iranian regime is not only going to be a problem for its citizens, a very cruel problem, a very constant pressure to inhibit and restrict human rights, the rights of men and women alike, and is embarked on a long-term project to not only destabilize the region, but to wreak havoc in this 21st century world that we live in. And that is clearly unacceptable. On the 24th of November of last year, the House of Representatives Foreign Relations Committee met and passed a resolution asking for immediate measures by the United States to end the unjust treatment against Camp Ashraf and its people. On the 7th of February, the Senate Armed Services Committee of the United States Senate, under the chairmanship of Senator Levin and Senator McCain, also expressed concern for the current position that we take with regard to the people of Camp Ashraf. We've also had a court decision that requires the State Department of the United States to reevaluate its current designations and suggests that they are out of step with the prevailing attitudes around the globe with regard to the movement led by Mrs. Rajavi. Specifically, Camp Ashraf security, it seems to me that the time has come to do the right thing for those who want democracy and freedom and who want the people of Camp Ashraf to live in peace and security. We should, I think, remove the shackles that impede the potential that we see before us at this time. Iran's temporary regime, and I use the word temporary in a hopeful way, cannot stand this situation much longer. Everything that is happening around Iran must make the leaders of Iran wonder what in the world is happening. It cannot be that they see this as a good thing. We've had 2 years to offer reasonable options for the regime to define itself, as I said, and they have now defined themselves and they have defined their intent. Madame Rajavi, it is time for those of us from the United States who have come to know and admire you and your colleagues and your goals to do what is required and to recognize the legitimacy of your movement and your ideals. I intend to work towards that goal personally. I hope that all U.S. participants will unite in this effort. Beautiful speeches must now produce beautiful results. And I agree with you, Madame Rajavi, that it is now America's turn. Vive le peuple iranien, vive la liberté, le grand espoir pour tous les êtres humains. Merci beaucoup, Mesdames et Messieurs.